My name is Ryan Johnson. I'm 42 years old, and today I find myself standing at the precipice of change. My life had always been serene, simple, and, truth be told, rather uneventful. But everything shifted drastically in a single night. Since marrying Emily, I believed we had constructed a solid foundation. She was the woman I'd loved since my college days, and we had built a life together that seemed almost idyllic. We owned a cozy home, had steady careers, and shared a bond that, on the surface, appeared unshakable. That illusion lasted until about 6 months ago when I began noticing peculiar changes. A subtle yet undeniable distance had begun forming between us. Emily was increasingly consumed by her work, leaving me alone with my thoughts far more often than I cared to admit. Initially, I attributed it to job-related stress, but as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was amiss. Our time together had dwindled, and even when we were in the same room, she seemed distracted, her words few and her demeanor withdrawn. The spark of connection we once shared now felt like a distant memory. Then came the night. I did something I never imagined I'd resort to. I set up a surveillance system in our home. At first, it was meant to address the nagging unease gnawing at me, not out of distrust, but as a way to gain clarity. The system, designed to enhance security, also had the ability to record calls and messages. I hesitated to enable those features initially, convincing myself I was overthinking. But the uneasy knot in my stomach refused to loosen. Eventually, I decided to activate the recording function. Not because I wanted to pry, but because I couldn't bear to ignore the nagging suspicion any longer. The early days of listening were uneventful. Conversations I intercepted were mundane, revolving around work and daily routines. Yet, as time passed, certain patterns began to emerge. Her phone calls at night grew longer, and an increasing number of them were from a contact I didn't recognize. It was only when I noticed the timing of these calls, always after I'd left for my evening shifts, that my apprehension solidified into something more. Emily's demeanor toward me hadn't changed outwardly. She still smiled, laughed, and engaged in casual chatter. But the recordings revealed a different side of her, a side I wasn't privy to. One evening, I overheard her voice on a lengthy 40-minute call. At first, it seemed like any ordinary conversation, but gradually, her words took on a tone laced with implication. "You know," she said, her voice heavy with emotion, "I feel like a ghost in Ryan's life. Everything with him is routine, predictable. I need something different." Each word felt like a dagger to my chest. The man on the other end was Alex, her colleague at the financial firm where she worked. He wasn't merely a co-worker. He was someone who had clearly captured her heart. As I continued to listen to their exchanges, the true nature of their relationship came into focus. In another call, Emily confessed, "He doesn't make me feel seen anymore. Ryan's lost interest in me. But you make me feel alive, special, like I matter." Hearing those words, I felt my world shatter. My heart clenched as I replayed her conversations in my mind. Her betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a painful reality I could no longer ignore. The following morning, I decided to confront her. I stayed home from work, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. I had compiled the recordings, highlighting the moments that left no room for doubt. When Emily walked through the door, I was waiting in the living room. My face must have betrayed the storm raging inside me, because her confident expression faltered as soon as she saw me. "Emily," I began, my voice calm but cold, "we need to talk." Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw the panic flicker across her face. "I've heard the calls," I continued, holding her gaze. "Everything you said to Alex, I know." She froze, her hands trembling. "Ryan, I can explain." "Explain?" I interrupted sharply. "How do you explain telling another man that I'm not enough for you? That you're bored with me? That I'm replaceable?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, her voice cracking. Hurt me? I echoed bitterly. You didn't think about that when you were calling him, confiding in him, choosing him over me. Emily stood there, silent, as the weight of my words sank in. You've made your choice, I said firmly. And now I'm making mine. Pack your things. You're leaving today. Her lips quivered as she tried to protest. Ryan, please. I love you. I was just lonely. I made a mistake. Lonely. I spat, anger flaring in my chest. How lonely were you under the same roof, sharing the same life, the same bed? How lonely could you possibly have been? Her silence was deafening. I took a step closer, my voice low but resolute. This marriage is over. I won't let you stay here and pretend like nothing happened. It's done. Emily's face crumpled as tears streamed down her cheeks, but I didn't waver. She placed her purse on the floor, her hands shaking. So, this is it, she murmured, her voice barely audible. This is it, I confirmed, my tone devoid of the warmth I once felt for her. And with that, I turned away, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices. I don't ever want to see you here again. This ends now, I said, my voice unwavering. She met my gaze for a final moment before turning away, walking out without a word. The silence she left behind hung in the air, filling the room with an unsettling stillness. Once the door clicked shut, I stood frozen, saying nothing, doing nothing, just absorbing the sudden void. It was as though everything I had known had vanished in an instant. But in reality, I had gained something far more valuable, freedom. The days that followed were filled with a single focus, preparing for what lay ahead. This house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every object around me was a reminder of Emily, but I knew I couldn't live in the past any longer. I had to act decisively. I kept the surveillance system running, the recordings of Emily's calls to Alex piling up. With each conversation I listened to, it felt like I was digging myself deeper into a grave, uncovering layers of deceit I hadn't expected. Their affair was only the surface. They were involved in something far worse, a financial scam. I started hearing them talk about transferring money from her account, covering up lavish vacations and expensive gifts using my funds. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial, a violation of everything I had worked for. Fury surged through me, and I realized I couldn't let this end quietly. I needed to act. I reached out to a private investigator, one I knew from my company. His swift work uncovered even more damning details. Alex and Emily had not only shattered my marriage, they were committing fraud, manipulating my trust for their own gain. I began preparing for a legal battle, knowing it would be tough. This wasn't just about seeking justice. It was about defending my dignity and everything I had built. The betrayal had reached deeper than I had ever imagined, threatening not just my heart, but my life's work. I wasn't about to let them escape unpunished. As I walked through my large, empty home, each step felt heavier than the last. The place no longer held the comfort it once did. The discovery of Emily's infidelity had altered me irreparably. I wasn't the man I used to be. The more I listened to their conversations, the more I felt suffocated. They hadn't just hurt me emotionally, they had stolen from me. They had exploited my trust to finance their secret life. I couldn't ignore it any longer. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about seeking justice. I called my lawyer and scheduled an urgent meeting. We discussed the financial theft, the lost money, and how I could recover what had been taken from me. It was going to be a brutal fight, but I wasn't backing down. My lawyer outlined a strategy that would focus on the illegal transfers between Emily and Alex. These weren't just acts of infidelity. They were serious financial crimes. I would make sure they paid the price. As the investigation continued, the private investigator provided reports that not only confirmed their affair, but exposed their careful efforts to keep it hidden. They had used business trips and social events to conceal their secret lives. But now, everything was out in the open. The time for confrontation came. I was prepared. Although part of me still felt pain, another part was fueled by anger and a fierce desire for justice. It wasn't just about confronting Emily. It was about holding both of them accountable for everything they had done. An official meeting was arranged with my lawyer and representatives from the bank. There, I presented irrefutable evidence. The illegal transfers, the recordings of their calls where Emily confessed to not only deceiving me, but trying to defraud the bank. When Alex realized the severity of the situation, I saw the fear in his eyes. The confident mask he once wore had vanished, replaced by panic. "Ryan, please don't do this," he pleaded, his voice shaking. "You can't be this cruel." I stared at him, unmoved. "I can't forgive this. You didn't just ruin my life. You've put everything I've worked for at risk. You and Emily thought you could take advantage of me, but you're wrong. You'll pay for this." Alex sputtered, trying to explain, but his words only intensified my anger. They had misjudged me. They thought I would passively accept their betrayal, but they were mistaken. The meeting didn't end there. Later, my lawyer informed me that both Alex's and Emily's companies were investigating them for financial fraud. The bank was reviewing the illegal transactions, and it was clear they would face serious legal consequences. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. Not only had I regained justice, but I had also protected what I had spent years building. However, when I looked back at the aftermath, I didn't feel triumph. This wasn't a victory I had wanted. It was something I had been forced to fight for, to protect myself. While I had won, I knew that life would never be the same. The legal consequences were already in motion. Everything I needed to recover had been set in motion, but the emotional wound they had left in me would take far longer to heal. I realized now that I no longer craved companionship. I had no interest in seeking forgiveness from Emily. I had accepted that I would spend the rest of my life alone, but I was determined to move forward, wiser from the pain. The lesson was clear. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. Once it's broken, everything you've built crumbles along with it. Sometimes, justice isn't found in forgiveness. It's found in making the tough decisions and executing them without mercy.